Hey everyone, so today's video is going to be a really fun and exciting one. I am starting a new little series here on my channel and I really love January because I get to start all of my new project pan intros and just bring some new series into my channel, and I feel like just refresh my channel a little bit. So this series is going to be called 1 Week, 1 Palette, and I believe Emily's Makeup Bag also does this, so I have seen a couple other YouTubers do it as well. So it's not my own original idea, but I wanted to incorporate some kind of eyeshadow series into my channel, and I decided on this one where I get to focus mainly on one palette for about a week out of the month. And I feel like this will really help me get some use out of the eyeshadow palettes in my collection and really get to know the eyeshadow palettes in my collection a little bit more. So for this week's 1 Week, 1 Palette, I chose the Urban Decay Born to Run palette, and this has been in my collection for a pretty long time. A lot of you probably already know what this looks like, and honestly, I hadn't used this very much before this week. It was pretty much just sitting in my collection, almost untouched. I did roll this into my eyeshadow project pan that I started when I first started my channel. That ended up kind of being a fail, but I did use this a little bit in that project, but I really hadn't used a lot of the shades in here. So also, when I look at this palette, I love the outside packaging and the sort of design of this palette, and the way they did the packaging is really beautiful. But the inside and the colors in here just don't really draw me in for some reason. I don't know if it's the layout of the shades, or I almost feel like it's just a bunch of random shades thrown together. It's not really as much of a cohesive color story maybe as I would have liked. So that might have something to do with it. It definitely is a very versatile palette because there are a ton of different shades in here to play with. But I don't know, something about this palette just rubs me the wrong way, and it's just not my favorite. I'm not very inspired when I look at this, and I almost just don't know what to do with it. So anyways, moving on to the 1 Week, 1 Palette. Basically, these videos are going to be my 5 looks that I created with the palette for the week. I'm going to explain to you how I created the looks, as well as pop some pictures up on the screen, obviously, so you guys can see the looks that I created, and just sort of giving my overall in-depth review of this palette and how I feel about it. So I'm not really sure exactly how to format this to make it best for you guys to sort of understand and follow along with. But for right now, I'm just going to say all 5 looks, I used the Weekender shade as a transition shade, and I really love this transition shade. It's the perfect transition for my skin tone. It definitely doesn't match my skin tone exactly. It's a couple shades darker than my skin tone, so I feel like it's just perfect on me as a transition shade. So again, I did use that Weekender shade as the transition in every single one of these looks, so I'm not going to be repeating that every time as I go through the looks. And I guess I will just start off with the first look. So the first look I did was sort of like a bronze smoky eye. It wasn't very smoky, it was just like a natural everyday type of look, and I kind of just wanted to start with a really easy look like that. So I will again pop the picture up on the screen. So again, like I said, for the transition I use the shade Weekender, and then throughout my crease I use this deeper brown shade called Riff. And then I used a little bit of this really deep brown shade called Punk in my outer corner, and just to give a little bit more dimension to the look. And then on my eyelid, I use the shade Smog more on the outer portion of my eyelid. And then on the inner portion of my eyelid, I went in with this sort of lighter champagne called Stranded. And this was just a really pretty easy everyday look, really, that you can probably get out of a lot of neutral eyeshadow palettes. So there was nothing really special about this look. I just wanted to do a really basic look for my first look with this palette. And then also as my inner corner and brow bone highlight, I use the shade Breakaway, which is just sort of the perfect inner corner and brow bone highlight. And it's pretty much the only one in here that I could use that way. So that's pretty much what I use for every single one of these looks for my inner corner and brow bone highlight. Now, I don't know if it's better for me to just pop the looks up on screen and just explain a little bit of my thought process and how I like the look, or if you guys actually want to know every single shade that I used on my eyes. So let me know down below in the comments what you prefer and how exactly you would like me to format this video and what is best for you guys, because I really love your feedback and I would really like to know how you would like to see these videos formatted. So the second look was, it looks basically like the first look I did, except with a little bit of green on the outer corner, and in my head this looked a lot different and a lot cooler, but it's basically just a neutral look with a little bit of green on the outer corner. So I'm not going to go through every single shade I use. I feel like it's just going to get redundant, but the green shade that I did use on the outer corner was Wonderlust, and I was expecting this look to be a lot more green, but it just sort of turned into like a deepening green shade on the outer corner. I did like the way it looked with the little pop of green, and it was just something a little bit different, but it was still a pretty neutral look. So I did like this look. Again, it was just another more everyday look, so there was nothing really special about it, but I did like the way the pop of green looked. Look number 3 was a more purple berry toned sort of halo eye, and I also really liked this look. I feel like a lot of the time when I do halo eyes they end up being purple for some reason, but obviously I did use like some of these berry purples over here. This matte shade called Hell Ride was like my main deepening the outer corner and inner corner for the halo eye, and then in the center of the lid I just put Guilt Trip like as a all over lid sort of shade, and then more focused in the center of the lid I put the shade Wild Heart, which is a little bit lighter and a little bit more pink. So that's how I got that halo eye effect. And for this one I actually didn't stick completely to this palette. What is in the center of my lid, like just in the center, nowhere else, is one of my Ciate liquid shadows. So I did feel like it needed a little bit more of a pop. I didn't really like the way it looked without that liquid shadow. The liquid shadow just brightened the center of my lid up a little bit and gave it sort of the finishing touch that it needed. So with the metallic shades in here, I was pretty disappointed with them. They're definitely nothing super intense. In fact, I think the metallic shades in here are probably like some of my least favorite metallics in my collection. I do like my metallic shades to be pretty intense and blinding, and these are just sort of lackluster, and I feel like they don't give the effect that I want, and I will talk about that a little bit more in some later looks. But the fourth look I did was sort of a smoky eye, and I actually like the way this turned out, but it was a lot more difficult, I feel like, than it should have been. Another thing with these shadows are I find that they aren't the easiest to work with. The mattes do end up being a little bit patchy for the most part, a lot of the mattes in here. Obviously, the more neutral shades aren't as patchy. Those are sort of harder to mess up. But I feel like with like the shade Hell Ride and also the shade Jet, I did get a little bit of patchiness. So for this halo eye, I put Jet all over the lid, and I believe the main color was Punk that I sort of deepened the outer corner and blended it out with a little bit. And I also put the shade Drift on the center of my lid, just as sort of like a shimmery shade all over my lid. And again, it wasn't very shimmery or metallic. So I did end up going in with the shade Radio, which is more of a deep blue shade, and I popped that more in the center of my lid. And then right in the center of my lid, I put the shade Big Sky, which is a little bit of a lighter blue shade, and that just gave a little pop to the center of my lids that I feel like it needed, just a little bit of brightening. And I did like the way the smoky eye looked. I felt like it was just a lot more difficult to create than it should have been, and just more difficult than I wanted it to be. So I feel like this is a palette I wouldn't really end up reaching for in the future, just because of my experience with using it this week. And really, this is the only time I've really dug into this and used most of the shades in here. So I feel like I do have a full opinion on it now. But for the last look, it is what I'm wearing on my eyes today. And it is just a really pretty, more smoky, bronzy, really warm toned eye. And I do really, really love the way this look turned out. Again, it's not like how I expected it to turn out, but I did like the way it turned out, and I feel like it took me longer. This one wasn't as bad as the Smokey Eye look number 4 that I did, but these are obviously a little bit lighter, more easy to work with shades. So I did take, again, a Weekender in my crease, and then the main shade I used was Baja, which is this bright orange, and it's a really beautiful shade. I found this one pretty easy to work with, and it did require a little bit of building up to really get that orange punch, but I did enjoy the way this looked and the way it applied on my eyes. And then the deepening shade that I used is the shade Punk, and I found this one just to be a little bit patchy and a little bit hard to work with, but I did make it work. So I obviously just deepened up the crease with the shade Punk, and then all over my lid I put the shade Accelerate, which is just a really pretty bronzy shade, and this looks like an all matte look when there's a metallic shade all over my lid. So that is kind of what I'm talking about when I say the metallic shades in here aren't very intense. They are definitely pretty lackluster. So that is not how I like my metallics to be. So I was pretty disappointed with this. And even though I do like the way the look turned out, it just looks like an all matte look when on the majority of my eyes, I used a metallic shade. So I would expect it to look metallic, but it just doesn't. So I was pretty disappointed with this palette, even though I did enjoy a few of the looks I created this week. So as you can probably already tell, my thoughts on this palette aren't the best. This definitely is not my favorite palette in my collection, and I actually want to do even though I just did a whole collection declutter, I want to do a solely eyeshadow palette focus declutter, hint hint. So that will probably be coming in a few months. I definitely am not going to film that anytime soon because I am going to school and I'm not going to have my whole makeup collection with me. But my sort of overall thoughts on this palette is the color story just sort of confuses me, and I feel like I'm very overwhelmed when I look at it, and I just don't really know what to do with this. And it looks pretty in theory, but then when I actually go to use it, I feel like I'm just confused and don't know what to do. Also, a lot of the looks I feel like turn out the same with this. You had those neutral shades, and then like I feel like there are a lot of warm tones in here as well. Like obviously you have these sort of blue tones and this green and then some of these purples, so it does have a little bit of versatility to it, but not as much versatility as you would think just looking at it. And it is also not the easiest palette to work with. I feel like Urban Decay has really improved their formula. Even though I don't have any of their new palettes, I feel like their old formula wasn't very good in the first place, and I've heard really good things about their more recent palettes. So I would like to try like the Urban Decay Honey palette. Looks really beautiful, or really any other naked palette that's more recent, because I feel like their quality has improved a lot, even though I haven't tried the newer ones. But overall, this was just sort of a disappointing product, and it's definitely not the easiest to work with. And given I have had it for a while, so that might have something to do with it. But I feel like even when I first got this, it just wasn't my favorite palette, and I found it not the easiest to work with. So this is probably one of my least favorite palettes in my collection, even though I think the reason I've kept it for so long is because it was so hyped up initially. And also the packaging of this is just beautiful. Like I could sit here and look at this for 10 minutes and not get bored. So I really love the packaging of this. However, the product inside is definitely not my favorite. So that wraps up this video for my first 1 week, 1 palette episode. Let me know if you guys want to see any specific palettes in my next 1 week, 1 palette video. I don't really have an updated eyeshadow inventory, but if you want to sort of see what I have, you can watch my collection declutter where I sort of show you a lot of my collection. But anyways, if you did enjoy this video and if you want to continue to see this series, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. And I do post new videos about 3 times a week, so if you want to see more from me, make sure to subscribe and don't forget to hit that bell icon to get notified every time I post. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.